Greetings, this is Luxa from the future, here with a quick note about today's episode. Between the time of recording the interview with my guest, Micheal M Hughes, and getting the episode produced and ready to release, the YouTube channel with the content that we'll be talking about today was taken down. I re-recorded the end of the episode to keep up with the new development, but I wanted to just let you know about this because there's a point in the conversation where we do suggest that you go watch some of the content for yourself. It was pretty entertaining, but that, alas, will no longer be possible to do. I have, however, included a few sound clips so that people will be able to get some context for what we're talking about. And the news music, which is accompanying this and which will accompany the clips, was created by Squidums. Cheers.
Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
It moves my heart to see your awakened faces. The look of aha, shining, finally, in so many wide open eyes. Yes, we are the 99%. All of us, refusing to forget each other. No matter, in our hunger, what crumbs are dropped by the 1%. The world we want is on the way. Arundhati, and now we are hearing her heartbeat. The world we want is us, united, already moving into it. That is The World We Want Is Us by Alice Walker. Hello and welcome to another episode of Occult. This is, of course, the podcast where we gleefully taunt the mundane, butcher the Latin and most other languages, and also discuss a variety of occult, esoteric, spiritual, and adjacent topics. Exploring the intersections of magic, science, art, philosophy, technology, and so much more through the lens of chaos magic, this is occultism for everyone. I'm your host, Lux Estrada, and if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, that means that this show, and magic for that matter, are for you if you want them. There are a lot of different ways to be more free in the world, and using magic or making space for a spiritual practice in your life, especially in an accountable way, can be one of these ways to be more free. As always, I don't speak for anybody but myself. People can, will, and should disagree sometimes with the things that I or my guests say on this show, or perhaps any show. How will we ever learn anything, after all, if we were all in agreement on all things all the time? Unlike those who attempt to be reasonable should be willing to do, I can and often will revise my opinions or thoughts about things based on new evidence or developments. All right, very excited to share today's conversation with Micheal M Hughes about his 2017 spell to bind the old dumper and the way that it was received by the media at the time. We'll also talk about the content that some MAGA folks put out in response and look at the mechanics of the right-wing grift as it plays out in the area of occult spaces. We can see plenty of examples of other flavors of this same type of grift out there, maybe things having to do with like supplements or like buying metals or some kind of like classic, maybe older touchstones. I'm not saying that all supplements or metal purchases are cons, just that the grift model can be used to sell almost anything, including yoga pants, and I'd certainly not advocate against those. Anyway, a grift becomes a political or religious or spiritual grift when the grifter uses the momentum of the target's belief systems as a shortcut for getting the target to trust the con person. We can see from looking at true crime stories from history about cults and maybe multi-level marketing schemes and stuff along these lines that it can be easier to pull off a con when your mark already identifies you as a member of some type of group that they're a part of. So something like a political party or a religion or a cause or whatever can be a great vehicle for doing this, which is why it's so common. I'd put a lot of pink or greenwashing corporate marketing schemes or campaigns in a similar sort of category as being a political type of grift. Also, how greater culture is talking and thinking about magic and pagans and other, smaller spiritual movements is probably always something that magical practitioners will want to keep an eye on. And as things get increasingly grim around religious freedom and stuff like that, I think it's important to kind of have your head on a swivel for these topics. So today's tale that we'll be discussing with Micheal M Hughes is a little slice of occult history that happened right in our little neck of the cultural woods. So I thought listeners would enjoy hearing us unpack a little bit about MAGA witches or magicians or practitioners and the so-called magic wars of 2017. Stoked to get into it here with you all today. Before I do, a little bit of housekeeping here. If you like the show or other work I've been getting into, you can support it on Patreon. And if you do so, you can take a bibliomancy break with me. You can send me your question via email, and I will send you a response, which I have derived from my bibliomancy roll tables and books. Buy Me Coffee is also an option for people who want to show their support with a one-time donation and don't want to do the whole Patreon rigmarole. Your support in whatever form it comes makes this show possible by allowing me to cover the expenses associated with making it, thereby justifying to myself the not inconsiderable time that I spend. Although I'm an extremely introverted person and actually have been kind of off of social media for a little while here, which has been a nice boon to my mental health. I do need to get back to it, of course, to promote the show, but I'm not there checking on stuff every day or anything like that. This certainly doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you all. I'm beyond lucky to have such amazing listeners, collaborators, cohorts, co-conspirators, etc. I always welcome people's thoughts or questions or comments or suggestions or whatever for the listener mailbag segment, and you can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Instagram at LuxOccultPod, or you can find me on Blue Sky at LuxEstrada919. Right, very excited to share my latest conversation with Micheal M Hughes. Let's get into it here.
Keep the headset on, see if it gets any on. Okay. Give us some weight out. Notation just said on the battery. It's on the battery? Okay. Shield has been removed. Okay. This is we're falling off it again. Yeah. Strange.
All right, well, my guest once again today is Micheal M Hughes. Micheal, welcome.
Hey, it is so great to be back.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you back. Very relevant and timely topics we are discussing today, as well as looking back in history. So it's a fun kind of look at a lot of, I think, relevant things.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's time for a nice retrospective as we ponder where we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward and where we're going, for sure.
Absolutely. So for people listening who haven't heard our first conversation, which people can go back and listen to, it's called Magic for the Resistance and the History of the Tarot. But if people haven't heard that, maybe if you wouldn't mind giving us like a quick little like introduction and also catching us up on some of the history that we're going to be talking about today as like setting the stage for all of this.
Yeah, wow. Where to begin? I am a writer and a magician. I've been practicing magic since probably, I felt like I was doing magic even as a kid. I just wasn't aware of it. But in my late teens, early 20s, I was introduced to witchcraft and Wicca and got kind of passionate about that, and then started delving into chaos magic in the early days of the internet, when that was the thing on the internet. And over time, I've just become a student and a practitioner of magic, and I consider my style very eclectic, because and this ties in a lot to what we're going to talk about tonight, but I got really deep into the Golden Dawn style of magic and was doing that for a long time and getting just really, really immersed in it. And then I sort of had a bit of a eureka moment where as I was studying the history of magic too, it was like, I want to understand historically what magic is and what people did through time and how that changed and how that evolved. And the more history I read, particularly, I was really into tarot. I got my first tarot deck when I was 11. So I've been into tarot my entire life. And the more I read about tarot and the history of the tarot, it was like, wait a minute. This Golden Dawn stuff is based on like a lot of nonsense, a lot of history that we know now is not real. And I also ran into a rabbi at one point at a Masonic event, and we were talking about esotericism and magic, and I told him about, my work with the Golden Dawn and the Kabbalah, and he said, no, that's not Kabbalah. I was pronouncing it Kabbalah back then. He's like, well, first of all, it's pronounced Kabbalah, and that's what you're talking about is Christianized. It's not the real thing that Jews practice. And that he said, if you want to learn Kabbalah, then you really have to study with a rabbi. And all that stuff you're reading has been filtered through these Christian hermeticists and things, and we don't really accept that. So that was fascinating to me. So here I am, like deep into Kabbalistic Golden Dawn magic, which is based on the tarot and the tree of life. And I started thinking, well, if this is all kind of appropriated and kind of nonsensical in a lot of ways and based on Egyptian history that we know now isn't true, what am I doing? So that was a eureka moment, and I just said, I'm just going to study magic from the very beginning. I'm just going to read about it, going to read the history, and so that's what I've been doing for the last 25 plus years, is really trying to study magic, to look at the through lines and different practices from the ancient world to now. So that's my magical background. But what really kind of blew me up into the internet stratosphere was a ritual, a mass spell I wrote that I published in 2017, in February of 2017. And that was right after Donald Trump had first been elected the first time around. And, I thought the spell, it was called A Spell to Bind Donald Trump and All Those Who Abet Him. And it was a binding spell. It was based on, binding spells go back to ancient Greece, Roman times. And so I wrote this spell, and I thought this will be kind of fun to share and do with people, and perhaps it'll get a little traction in the witchcraft pagan community. And it just went like insanely viral, to the point where like every major TV network was calling me, every newspaper was reaching out. It was written about in the Los Angeles Times, the BBC, CNN covered it, and it just blew my mind that a spell, a magical spell that I published on Medium, and it got so big that it really kind of derailed my whole existence. I was working at a job at a university, and I could like barely focus on my job because so many people were reaching out. This thing had gotten so big, and it became what I really believe is the largest magical working like ever. I can't think of any other magical ritual that was done by so many people so many times. It was done monthly, every waning crescent moon through those entire 4 years of his presidency. And then after January 6th happened, we stopped. We're like, okay, this guy's never going to be elected president again. The U.S. has learned its lesson. And so we all know what happened after that. Okay. So I did write a book. This kind of led to sort of a movement. And I don't claim that I started the movement, because I feel like it was kind of bubbling up anyway. But I sort of gave it the name the Magic Resistance. And it really, in a lot of ways, the witch became sort of the face of opposition to Trump and everything he was doing. Witches really came to the forefront in a way that I don't think we have ever seen before. So that was beautiful and humbling to me, to think that I sort of, gave some gas to that this thing that was sort of percolating under the surface and then kind of blew it wide into the public consciousness. So I decided to write a book. It's called Magic for the Resistance, Rituals and Spells for Change, and that came out from Llewellyn in 2018, came out just in time for the midterm elections. And recently, late last year, it came out in a revised and updated version because so many people were saying, we're back where we were again.
I was going to ask
Please
if it's
help.
been reprinted, because when we spoke before, it had gone out of print recently, and it was like, as you said, after January 6th, a lot of people are like, oh no, and what blessed ignorance we were living in, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you think that, like, the sort of what would be maybe called the mainstream media, like, why do you think that people like CNN and all those folks were so interested in something like this?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of things. I think we've all seen in the past, like 10 years-ish, how witchcraft has become so popularized, especially with social media. And, with things like tarot, like I teach tarot courses, and I would teach these courses in a variety of settings. And I usually get when I started, I get 12, 15 people would show up. And as the years went on, I started doing them in bigger and bigger classrooms. I used to teach it at Johns Hopkins University, and they had to put me in the biggest lecture hall on the campus, and then there was still a waiting list. I'm like, whoa, something's going on here. So I feel like magic and occultism and witchcraft was just it was becoming so popular that was part of it. And I think the other part of it is that it was just the right pairing of things at the right time. And that was this desire of people. And so many people are drawn to witchcraft and the occult because they're just burned out or turned off by mainstream religions. And we see that everywhere as like the spiritual but not religious sort of demographic just keeps getting bigger and bigger because of scandals and just people being turned off by especially fundamentalism and how it's creeped into so many mainstream religions even. I mean, mainstream Christianity now is overtaken by this kind of toxic fundamentalism. So I think people were looking for something. I also felt like from the very beginning, in order to do activism in this age where we're so oversaturated with media and social media, it needs to come out of left field. It needs to be something totally unexpected. And I that was kind of the reason why I wrote the spell in the first place. I thought, what's something that can capture public attention? And I thought, wow, a bunch of witches casting a spell on the president. That's sexy. That's to journalists. There's something about that just resonated with so many people, and it hadn't existed before. So it felt fresh and it felt different and it felt scary to people, the way people are sort of attracted but also scared of witchcraft and occultism and things like that. So this whole complex of trends, I think, just kind of came together, and it was just different. As a journalist myself, people are always looking for something that tweaks that. Oh, what's this? It's new, it's interesting, and it hit the zeitgeist at just the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people who participated in this weren't even people who were living in the US. Trump was doing damage in places other than just the US. And so there was a lot of people, as far as I was able to read in British sources and stuff like that were, paying attention to this. And I do think you're right that it was really sort of this very timely thing where it's well, okay, fuck, now what? Well, magic is a great answer to that question oftentimes. So yeah.
Cool. The other thing that blew my mind, and it actually this was one of the things that made me so happy, was hearing people, just like you said, who were just so beaten down and horrified by what was happening, and seeing that like the normal, like the Women's March and things like that were happening, but they weren't moving the needle really. And so many people said, fuck it, why not? Like, I'll do a spell. So many people said that and told me that. And what really was so beautiful about that to me is that I think so many people got a taste of their own power for the first time, got a taste of what ritual can bring to their lives, how ritual can kind of stimulate them and energize them. That to me, like just the idea that tens of thousands, maybe even into the 100,000s, there's no way to quantify it. But like you said, it was all over the world. I was getting feedback from that so many people for the first time maybe said, oh, let's do a ritual. And after they were done, we're like, that's pretty cool. That felt great. Maybe I should think about doing that more.
Yeah, right on. Well, the response wasn't always so warm and sunshiny, though. It did get the attention and raise the ire of what I would actually classify as sort of like right-wing establishment magicians. Do you want to talk a little bit about the response from the official YouTube channel of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn?
Yeah, that as if the whole experience of becoming like the face of witches against Trump wasn't surreal enough. The backlash from the MAGA witches, which seems to a lot of people like it would be an oxymoron, but
unfortunately, it is not the case. Yeah.
Yeah, or just plain morons. But that was the biggest shock to me. Like I absolutely knew that I would get pushback, death threats, things like that. That's just, if you're in the public eye and you're in opposition to these crazy people, you are going to get pushback. You're going to get you're going to hear it from the MAGA people. But I obviously, I believe like the fundamentalist Christian MAGAs were going to come after me, but I did not expect witches. Like, and I guess I should have realized that witchcraft is so big now and it's such a huge tent that there would be plenty of MAGA witches that existed. But the biggest pushback, and actually the funniest, was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn that is now run by David Griffin and the Witch Queen, as she calls herself, his wife, the Witch Queen, Leslie McQuaid. They decided that they were going to engage in what they called magic wars against what I was doing. And that turned into an experience that really just still is the most absurd, unintentionally on their part, but the most absurd and unintentionally hilarious thing that I have ever experienced in my life.
My friends listening, it is a rich vein of comedy gold. And I don't want to like be too shitty about this. This was like 10 years ago, so who knows, maybe they have perhaps changed their minds, although they don't seem to have taken down their video about a spell to protect Trump and the what is it? Yeah, it's I can pull it up here, but they don't seem to have taken down their video from their YouTube channel about you and the counter magic that they were doing. Ritual to protect America and protect Trump from evil witches is the title I have here in front of me.
Okay.
Which is good. It's a good, strong title. Well done, Leslie and David. And I would highly recommend people check it out, because it does end with a sort of like man on the street segment where Leslie is interviewing onlookers about their opinions. And it is, I mean, as you would expect, if you go up to somebody on the street and you start talking about magic, expect to be laughed at. I just want to say that. And it doesn't disappoint. So I'm going to go ahead and play a clip. This is Leslie talking to somebody on the street after their ritual.
Some people are aware that there are a group of witches who are casting spells against everyone who voted for Trump. Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that.
Ah, okay. Well, how do you feel about that now that you do know?
I think that I could see where they're coming from because maybe their views on Trump, I'm not for him, but I think that, it could be weird like that, certain things.
Yeah, it's there's a point where well, first of all, they did the ritual on Trump's star on the Walk of Fame, and so that's that in itself tells you something about them. But it's so hyperbolic and so unintentionally like gut-wrenchingly funny. And at one point, part of the ritual is David has these chains wrapped around him. And Leslie has these bolt cutters. So the point is she's like, part of the ritual is her snapping the chains and like she's having a hard time with it. And at one point, I was laughing so hard, but I was also kind of terrified for him because I thought she might like slip and slice off his nipple or something.
Y'all. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So, and these people, it was, I think it was during Halloween. So there's like Superman is standing there and, these costume people are just like, what the fuck is going on? And I mean, it's really like I grew up in Baltimore and one of my favorite filmmakers is John Waters. And that's sort of my style of humor. And this even shocked me, the pure theater of the absurd that this was. It's hard to believe. Like, so yes, I encourage everybody listening to this, like take a few minutes, like, have an adult beverage or smoke or something and just sit and watch this and just be prepared to be absolutely, utterly mystified and just befuddled and a laugh, I mean, that's the beauty of it. There were elements of their attack against me, which I was not really, I mean, being called a Satanist, well, whatever, that's silly. But they had this Italian right-wing fascist occultist in one of their videos, and he started saying that I was a member of the IoT.
Yeah,
that
I was you were affiliated with the Temple of Psychic Youth. That you were. So I was going to ask, have you ever been a member of the IoT?
No,
I didn't think so. I actually remember that when we spoke before, you were very explicit in being like, "Well, I don't really like to call what I do chaos magic. I mean, the models of magic they work pretty well, and you describe them very nicely. But then also you were like, I like to call what I do experimental magic. So it's like, okay, you don't even identify as a chaos magician. Actually, it's so funny in this interview, like. This guy that they're interviewing, he's like, I asked a high-level Mason, and he told me that this symbol is associated with chaos magic. Like, well, no fucking shit, dude. Like, you don't have to ask a Mason to figure that out. I'm sorry. All of it was very humorous, but I do think I might have sacrificed a couple of IQ points. The work that I do for this podcast, I suffer. I do.
Well, you definitely did suffer if you watched that. But he also called me a pedophile. And, I talked to a lawyer and there's pretty much there wasn't much that I could do. And I've also heard that one of Griffin's things is he's very litigious and he tries to get, like lawyers into his little temple so that he can sue people. Because any other people have said that, because the Golden Dawn is a system of magic. Like he doesn't own it. Mm-hmm. It's no one owns it, but he's actually, he's gotten some trademarks or copyrights or something like that. And apparently just sues the shit out of people. And because he wants to be like the Golden Dawn, when you go on the internet, because he's shilling these like awful courses and things. And
there's all this like AI generated art and stuff. It looks very quality. Actually, so I have the description of the video that you're talking about here, and I'll go ahead and share it here. They're very focused on you. They're so obsessed with you. Satanist Micheal Hughes, who infiltrated Christian Freemasonry, leads dark witches in a monthly black magic ritual to bind all Trump voters. We expose Hughes' secret past and the latest on Hollywood pedophile rape and ritual murder scandals. They don't exactly say that that's you, but they're like, oh, we're also doing that. It's also the same sentence. So I did go back and look at, because now that the Epstein files are out, I was so curious, like, okay, they must be doing like this hard-hitting reporting on these like horrible scandals that are happening. But Michael, I was so disappointed to see that they haven't been doing the type of hard hit, at least not that I could find. And this is only from a cursory glance. So perhaps there is all kinds of great hard-hitting reporting out there. I did go ahead and poke around in the DOJ files, the Epstein files thing, and I did go ahead and, search for both of these people's names, and I'm so happy to say that neither of them came up, so that makes me so glad to hear, and I know that's a low bar, but that's also, like, cool when you hear it, right? Yeah, like I said, I don't want to be too shady here, or say anything that might bring these very litigious people ire. Obviously, I'm just kind of trying to figure out like what happened here. I noticed that they spent, it seemed like, at least from the content that you shared with me, like over like 5 hours talking about you and this operation and stuff. Like, how many times did they reach out to you for comment?
Very infrequently. They did threaten me. Can I read one of the threats that came out? Because it was pretty entertaining in itself.
Sure, yeah, if you think it's legally safe to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with those assholes. Like, if they want to come after me, bring it on. This was a message that he sent to me through Facebook. Said actually real witches are doing our part to stop your lunacy and defend the American Republic. Go ahead, bring it on at midnight. I mean, he's kind of Trump. Not only does he have he styles his hair sort of like Trump's rat nest, but he also is a terrible typist. So bring it on at midnight. We are waiting for your sorry asses with a magical army of real witches, magicians, shamanic practitioners, and Christian prayer warriors. You are about to start a civil war. Cease and desist now. We will show no quarter in our defense of the American public. We will show you what real magic is. You will pay dearly for what you are about to do. You have been warned. You are about to get your asses handed to you magically if you do not back down now. Signed, Rosicrucian Imperator, David Griffin, Hermetic Order, the Gold Dawn, HPS Barefoot Coven of Alexandrian Witches. Yeah. And that was, I mean, that was just one. There are multiple threats that he sent. I mean, he called me Darth Dickless, which I thought was actually pretty clever.
That's good. I like that one.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But he had a wanted poster with my face on it. Wanted black magician.
Wanted black magician. Wanted for the improper use of it. Kind of. They have a lot of like. They're not like necessarily like stealing from Harry Potter IP, but a lot of their stuff kind of rhymes with a lot of like Harry Potter stuff. So. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not, but it's definitely there.
It is. It's all part of the grift. I mean, it's all cheesy as hell. So they just, they'll take any pop culture reference that they think.
They seem to have cast you as sort of the Harry Potter character in this particular thing too, which I thought was an interesting choice. It was kind of, I don't know. Yeah, there was a lot of things that were confusing to sort of try to like logically unpack about a lot of what they said. So yeah. But
the worst was, being called a pedophile by a anti-Semitic right-wing magician who writes fantasies about the Illuminati, which basically coded Jews,
Yeah, there was all kinds of like anti-Semitic and other racist dog whistles and whatever. Here's a little example of one of those.
The country you were promised, not the one you see around you that's been bastardized, poisoned by the globalist elites.
It's one thing to have clownish people saying silly things like calling me a Satanist and making up stuff about my background, but some of it was just vile, and I just realized that what they were peddling is some pretty nasty stuff, really. I mean, it's one thing to be MAGA, it's one thing to support Trump and what he's doing, but to bring in these like really deranged, dangerous right-wing like fascists into the mix, like that's what disturbed me the most. Like stirring up these people who I think are really dangerous and dark people, and just to be I have kids, so calling me a pedophile, calling anybody a pedophile, is about as low as someone can go. And
unless it's true,
so,
right?
Right, yeah, if it's
Yeah.
true, right. But like you said, you could probably scour their website now and not find anything about the people in Trump's circle who were palling around with Jeffrey Epstein on his island. So like a lot of MAGA, it's really more a cult of personality than any sort of ideological or principled take on what they believe in.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And a lot of sort of what I noticed about the content, that they were very focused on you, and I didn't watch too much of their content outside of this content having to do with you. So I don't want to say that I'm like an expert on all of their stuff, because I am not. But from what I like saw about they're kind of looking at your stuff and being focused on you with this whole Magic Wars endeavor that they went on, there was a lot of sort of using you as the quintessential like devil, right? Like every sort of like religion or cult or whatever needs to have a devil. They need to have like a bad guy so that there can be a sort of like us versus them mentality. They say a lot of things in the video where they're kind of announcing this magic war that they're going to do and why they're going to do it and their kind of rationale for doing it and sort of explaining all that. And they say a lot of things in there that like, any reasonable person would like agree with. And it's like, okay, yeah, but then they sort of take it to this very confusing place. Like, for instance, Leslie talks about how, it's really important that we follow like the Wiccan Rede, but then she's also said in the same video that the Wiccan Rede isn't real and that Gardner Odely like put it in there because we needed to like make the Christians feel better, and like you're messing up relationships between the Christians and the witches, and that's one reason why you're evil. And then also in the same video, she starts talking about how people who are traitors to the Constitution should be like hung. And I'm like, Leslie, where's the Wiccan Rede now, dude? Like, what? Oh, wow. So like, there's just, but this sort of like, I don't want to say like emotional dysregulation, because I do think it's like a sort of intentional tactic to keep the viewer unbalanced. But it's a very sort of common thing that you see with people who are trying to like recruit somebody to a cause with like vibes rather than with ideas.
Yeah, it's one thing I think needs to be at the forefront of understanding them is whatever facilitates the grift, whatever makes them whatever gets someone to buy their courses. So they immediately started selling like Defense Against the Dark Arts courses. Again, pulling on the Harry Potter thing. It was, now I'm not saying they didn't believe all the twisted things that they said, but it always has to be understood as a means to an end. And that like many MAGA is about filling their bank accounts. I am quite convinced that is the case, but they do sort of believe it. And what's interesting to me is they seem to think that MAGA, and especially the fundamentalist Christian MAGA, they always sort of say, well, we're with the Christians, but they don't realize that most of the hardcore, faithful, fundamentalist Christian MAGA would string them up, because they're doing magic. So they seem to think that, oh, we get a pass because we support President Trump. But we've even seen that recently with, I think, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth just gave a speech recently where he talks about the problems with people being lured into paganism, and this is a guy that's got Deus Vult tattoos. I mean,
yeah, these people are scary.
But somehow, like David Griffin and Witch Queen Leslie McQuaid somehow think that these people would not turn on them for doing magic and waving around magical wands and having Egyptian god sculptures behind them in their temple and things like that. That's what perplexes me.
Well, this is unfortunately something that comes up in like a lot of different scenarios where you have a marginalized community, right? Like there's going to always be some members of that marginalized community that look at the sort of greater community that, is maybe oppressing them to some degree or another and say like, I'm one of the good ones. I'm not like these other people like me. I'm one of the good ones. Can't I be on your side? And we can see this in a lot of different cases, whether it has to do with like class stuff or race stuff or other things like that. And that was kind of part of the vibe that I got from this whole like magic wars thing. And so yeah, I don't know. It's the other thing I did want to comment on though also is just the idea that it can sometimes be easier to look at things rather than like left versus right, just looking at things through the lens of class. Because another thing that's like very, very prominent in a lot of their content is this sort of like huge Egyptian statues and all this like very fancy, very expensive, things that are really meant to give you the air of authority. But these are things that you like can buy at the store. They don't necessarily like prove how good of a magician you are or whatever, if that's like a thing that can exist, right? So I just thought that was another thing that was really prominent and that we could kind of point out here.
Yeah, that is a great point.
I don't want us to get too lost in the sauce though, because like one thing that the right loves to do is construct these like fucking straw man arguments that we're like left attacking without actually addressing the real fucking point. So why do you think these folks like took it so personally? Like we talked about, maybe it's just part of the grift, but assuming that it was really like heartfelt, ingenuous response, that they did feel like you were because they did say that they had talked with other people and people were feeling like they were just so downtrodden and they just couldn't get anything done, and they realized that it was this evil spell that you had been doing. And again, this is when Trump was in office. Like these people had their guy in office and they're still doing this like performative victimhood. I'll go ahead and play a clip here. This is Leslie talking about a survey that had been conducted.
Every survey that came back, somewhere in the questions, it slipped out. I just don't seem to be able to get done what I want to get done. It feels like I'm being held back. It seems like I just don't have the oomph to do what I used to do. I feel hamstrung. I feel tied up. And then that's when I started really thinking about it. You know what? I don't know how many of those 500 respondents voted for Trump, but I know there's at least some in there who did.
Here's another one of David and Leslie together from the same Magic Wars announcement video back in 2017. I did what I could with the audio. There's a lot of yelling. It's a little rough. Fair warning.
And these witches who seek to bind, they steal freedom. They are spiritual terrorists terrorizing us. We're going to bind everyone who...
Everyone who voted for someone we don't like. Everyone who has a political opinion different than ours. We are going to force you to do our bidding and do our will. They're crazy.
They're completely insane.
This is psychopathic.
Okay, they felt really, activated by this and stuff, but like, what was your actual intent? Like, was your intent to like bind the Trump voting populace? Because I noticed that the spell is written in the present tense, like people who are abet him, not like people who abetted him or whatever. So like, I'm curious what your thinking is on all of this.
Yeah, I was very careful when I wrote that spell to, first of all, I had to, I obviously, for reasons for my own personal safety, and I didn't want to do anything that could be construed as causing harm or wishing harm or anything like that. And plus, that's just not the kind of person I am. So it was very clear that this was binding this. And if you read it, it's very carefully written that it just says it's basically a way to stop Trump and those around him from doing harmful things. I think that's pretty clear. And I really worked that piece of text and I sent it around to a lot of people I trusted and things like that. And so really, if Trump and those who abet him, which were those were helping him do bad things, if he wasn't doing bad things, the ritual's kind of pointless. It's just, then there's no binding. If you don't do anything bad, there's no binding in response to it. So that's how I looked at it. And some people clearly, like, these two, somehow believed that I was, trying to do malign magic on everyone that had ever voted for him and things like that, which is just, and I even told him that. Like, I corresponded with him a little bit. I'm like, and I said exactly what I just said to you. But for whatever reason, he wasn't buying it. And I think, like you said, like having an enemy is a powerful thing. No matter, and having me as an enemy gave them like a focus, and you could look at it in a very blasé sort of sense, is that it's an easy way for them to whip people up into a frenzy and sell more courses. But I'm sure they really felt, I do believe they believed I believe they knew they were exaggerating to some extent. But also believe they just being delusional, like a lot of people who get swept up in MAGA belief. They were just delusional, I mean, they, and I really do believe that, like that people who believed so much in this man that got caught up in the cult of personality and whatever personal magic he has to captivate so many people, they were just caught up in that. So naturally, seeing someone who's saying, you people are sick and you're doing terrible things and you're harming people and you're harming the planet and you're bigots, etc. All the things we know and all the things we see, even multiplied the second term, they just didn't understand that, or somewhere deep inside they understood it. It's really hard to tease apart the fascist mentality, what really draws people to fascists and authoritarians. But we've seen it, like we know the playbook, and somehow people who live next door to us somehow get pulled into this sickness, this toxicity. There's an author named Paul Levy who wrote a book about Wetiko, and Wetiko it was a Native American concept for this sort of like beast inside of people that just wants to devour and take more and more. It's like consuming. It just wants to consume and consume and consume even when there's nothing left. It's like a ravenous hunger or something. So that's, for whatever reason, I don't know what they were like before Trump came along. Maybe they were very right-wing, bigoted people, and he just fueled them. But we've just seen what we've seen what fascism does to people, and I just really didn't expect it so much from the occult and witchcraft communities, but it really brought those people out. They exist. There are lots of them. I've lost friends. I've watched people who are, esoterically minded people, or people that were into synchromysticism, chaos magicians, all sorts of people, witches that I knew, pagans, druids, prominent druids that I know, just get pulled into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
we have to.
It just goes to show that just because you practice magic and call yourself a witch or a pagan doesn't mean you're not susceptible to these toxic mind viruses, the fascism in particular. So, that was a real awakening. That was a real awakening. And we've seen that, for the most part, luckily, witchcraft in general tends to be inclusive for a variety of reasons. I feel like a lot of people who are marginalized, a lot of people who aren't accepted, find community, find acceptance in witchcraft and paganism. And it's kind of always been like that in a lot of ways. So that's the beautiful thing about these kind of larger magical communities. But that's not always the case. And watching what's happening in the United States and also around the world, because this fascism is a global rising phenomenon, it really has brought the fascist occultists and witches and all out of the woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shown how many of them there are. They're still the minority, but they're a very loud minority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for people who are like newly coming into these spaces, it can be really like confusing kind of trying to like parse it out. That's something that me and my online community have been talking a lot about, trying to sort of like put out some content for people who are new to this stuff and sort of like, here are some red flags that we look at that, if I read this in a book, I might be asking myself some questions about like, why did the author choose to put that in as a reference or whatever. But yeah, so absolutely. And there's a lot of people, there's a researcher named Spencer Sunshine who I talked with about this, and there are people who are like right-wing fascists that their whole thing is to like infiltrate these spaces on purpose and turn them into sort of like recruiting grounds. So yeah, it's a concerted effort that I think people just sort of need to be aware of so that we can work against it.
Yeah, especially that's such a good point, and especially the overlap with the New Age community, which especially
and the
during
UFO stuff,
UFOs have always been a honeypot attractor and a tool for fascist recruitment. I've been into the whole UFO scene for longer probably than occultism and magic, and started noticing that back like in the 1980s with what's his face, Bill Cooper and all that, Behold a Pale Horse and all that sort of crazy stuff. But what really broke a lot of minds was the pandemic. And I watched so many people go off the rails into conspiracy. It was just like this perfect storm of this earth-shaking event, and everyone online, and a just ripe environment for conspiracies. And it was like that broke so many things. Like it broke so many parts of our culture and our institutions, but it really broke minds so much. And we still see that with the MAGA movement, but it really infected the New Age. Like New Age became just a sewer of toxic conspiracies and anti-institutional thinking, and it was just a breeding ground for a lot of really, really terrible stuff.
Yeah,
Like
now
there's,
it's become
kind of like 4chan mixed
Yeah.
with, the QAnon and all that stuff.
You'll find all
And
kinds of like birth control misinformation and shit there now, and like
yep,
anti-vax stuff, and it's just yeah, it's become a real sewer, as you said, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So many of these like cultural forces came together at the same time, and it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and this journey that I've been on, this whole magical resistance thing, has really been, there's so much positivity that's come out of it. But what I started seeing is people just burning out, people running out of gas, people running out of energy. And like so many of them said, well, we did this binding, and the stated goal of that binding was to drive Trump out of office, and it worked. Like, he was out of office, and we all sort of took a collective breath and said, we did this, we've learned.
3, 1, 2.
I apologize. It looks like
Hey,
my cat...
oh no worries.
So sorry. Cat
That's all right. I was just on this
sorry.
I was just on this rant, and I'm like, her face is frozen.
No, I'm so sorry. My cat came and disconnected me from the internet momentarily.
shit.
I'm so sorry.
Delta. Quebec.
Greetings. It is I, Luxa from the future. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with the rest of my chat with Micheal M Hughes shortly, including a discussion of the White Candle conspiracy, AI, and how Michael's thinking about magical activism has evolved since 2017, and much more. But first, I wanted to pop in to do this cat-mandated break to touch on another topic having to do with magic, current events, and the news media. Michael and I don't get into this in today's conversation, but people might have heard about there being that somewhat recent and very unfortunate coincidence in which Jezebel had published what was meant to be a humorous article about somebody paying an Etsy store owner to hex Charlie Kirk with some minor annoyances. I'll share a piece about all this written by Manny Monreo for Wild Hunt, which was published September 10th of 2025. The piece is called Charlie Kirk's Murder Intersects with Jezebel's Witchcraft Story, Raising Concerns for Pagans. So jumping to the middle of the article here, Manny writes, on Monday, September 8th, 2025, Jezebel published a piece with the provocative headline, "We paid some Etsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk." The subtitle read, "If the far-right misogynist with a bad haircut wants to villainize independent women, Jezebel is more than happy to be the hag of his nightmares." The article itself, says Manny, blends Jezebel's usual satire, cultural critique, and feminist focus with commentary on the online marketplace for witchcraft, as well as the marketing strategies there. The author described commissioning a, quote, powerful hex spell on Kirk through Etsy, providing his date of birth as a part of the process. The practitioner's reply was quoted, "I just completed your spell, and it was successful. You will see the first results within 2 to 3 weeks. However, I did notice disturbances, negative energy not only from you but projected at you, likely from toxic family members, coworkers, or new acquaintances." Continuing on with the article here, Manny comments that we know nothing about the practitioner other than, as Jezebel reports, they use the title of, quote, witch. While the tone of the article remained consistent with Jezebel's irreverent style and critique of misogyny, the piece closed with a questioning note. Quote, "So did my Etsy curse work? Time will tell. The forces move in mysterious ways." And as the priestess, referring to the witch who cast the spell on Etsy, reminds me, spell work is a collaboration between the caster, the client, and the universe itself. For now, we can only trust the timing of the greater unknown. So that's the end of the Jezebel article that we're talking about in this Wild Hunt article. So Manny continues on, since news of Kirk's death broke, the article has drawn intense attention. The comments section quickly overflowed, prompting Jezebel to restrict public responses. The magazine has also edited an editorial note to the already published article. This story was published on September 8th. Jezebel condemns the shooting of Charlie Kirk in the strongest possible terms. We do not endorse, encourage, or excuse political violence of any kind. In the light of these developments, continues Manny, the Wild Hunt felt compelled to inform our readers. The story appears to have gained traction in some conservative media already. The intersection of pagan identity, perceptions of witchcraft, and mainstream political discourse can shape public understanding of our communities. Jezebel's satirical piece, while consistent with the magazine's brand, and especially in context of today's events, risks stroking backlash against our community by invoking old, unfounded stereotypes and long-standing suspicions about witchcraft. For this reason, and with deep concerns for how such narratives may be weaponized, we believe that it is important to bring this matter to our community's attention. And I agree, it's important. Manny, thank you so much for that article. As was mentioned, the Jezebel article was quickly taken down with an apology, and the whole Etsy website has now banned the sale of those types of services. And a lot of sad and really terrible fallout has occurred from what everybody can agree was a really shitty thing that happened. I know people whose family members have decided that they were evil for being into paganism or witchcraft and have become estranged, which is just one of the many examples of the rippling effect that this type of tragedy can have. It's important to be aware of how religious and spiritual freedom, along with many other civil rights we tend to take for granted in the US, like voting, are under attack right now, too. I think that the people in charge definitely understand on some level how unpopular what they've been up to is and how much it goes against a lot of our sort of core values as a country, like democracy. They want to twist our arms into letting them stay in power, so let's not obey in advance and resist peacefully at whatever order of magnitude we have access to. All right, and speaking of resisting and magical resistance, let's dive into the rest of my conversation with Micheal M Hughes. Cheers.
We're turning around and heading back toward the base. The object of the sun is still beaming down lights to the ground.
So I'm curious about how this experience with, this huge level of focus, both good and bad, how has that sort of informed your magical resistance efforts, and how things evolved for you as a magician since this time?
Yeah, that is a great question and something I think about quite a bit. I think there was a lot of happiness and relief when the purpose of the binding, which was to drive Donald Trump from office, it worked. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I've got so much criticism from people look, you and these witches have been doing this every month, every waning crescent moon. What has it gotten us? And when Joe Biden won the election, that ritual had accomplished its purpose. The purpose was to drive Donald Trump from office. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you could say that's kind of a retroactive win. And maybe we shouldn't claim that, but no matter what, we did this thing, and we did it I did this ritual sometimes on Tuesday nights at midnight, before a day where I had a big meeting the next day and things. I did this while I was traveling. We did this for 4 years, every single month. And when we were done, we felt like we had accomplished something. We took what I believe is a nice, well-deserved breath. And there was still, we started doing rituals when Ukraine was invaded by Russia. That was very big. So there was still a lot of activism going on. But this particular ritual, we felt like we were done. And I think as people, we thought we were done with this man. And then we found out we were wrong. And I believe a lot of people started questioning, is this working? What am I doing? There was definitely some stock taking of magical resistance. Well, the first thing I've said this from the very beginning, is we're not just doing rituals. We're writing letters, we're making phone calls, we're marching. That from the very beginning, from February of 2017, it was never just about sit in your basement and light some candles and hope that things change. And what I learned very quickly is what maybe the biggest benefit of doing this sort of magic is just what it does for the person doing it. And that's recharging their batteries, recommitting them to what they believe in, recommitting them to the hard work of activism, which is, as we all know, is like draining. It takes a lot of times. Many of us would like to just sit and play a video game or read a book or just play with our cats and watch TV. But we don't. We feel compelled to be activists or to be active and do things to make our world a better place and to stop things that we know are harmful. So we burn out. Activist burnout is a very real thing, and anyone who's ever been an activist or worked in activist circles knows how easy it is to burn out. But what rituals, and I didn't know this before I started this whole thing, what rituals are like plugging back in. And I can't tell you how many times I personally was just beaten down, crushed by watching what was happening, but watching that man's face burn at the end of a ritual and saying, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired," and then laughing at the end of the ritual, which is part of the original Trump binding ritual, instantly refueled me. And it did that for so many people. So one of the lessons I've learned is that, yes, we want to make this magic have effects in the larger world. That's why any of us do magic, or most of us. But most of us also realize that it's also about improving ourselves as people, or getting in touch with whatever higher thing there is you believe exists. And that, so for me, what I've discovered is these maybe the most important part of the ritual is not if it has its intended effect in the world. Obviously that's important. Obviously we want that to happen. But part of that process is re-energizing ourselves, recommitting ourselves to the work, and recommitting ourselves to the things we believe in, and knowing that those things we believe in are important. And so I wrote the last very big piece of magic that I've written is called the White Candle Conspiracy. And the whole purpose of that is and it's just one white candle. And it's like, if you could find one of those really big pillar candles, that's what I encourage people to use with it. And it's called a conspiracy because you leave that candle out. And it could just be sitting on your dining room table. It could be sitting by your bedside, whatever. But it's a conspiracy because it's hidden, and anyone can have a big white candle sitting out. It doesn't need to be a witchy altar or anything like that. It's just a big white candle. And part of that ritual is you basically commit yourself to the principles you believe in: freedom, love, equality, peace. And you realize that while you were doing this really simple ritual that you could do in like a minute, that you're connected with other people who are also doing this ritual. It's like, so you envision like the globe, and you envision little lights popping up everywhere and connecting everyone to it. Because that's what we need. I think that's what we need more than anything as the world gets darker and more grim. Watching people get shot in the face, by ICE agents, and watching little children being used as bait for their family. I mean, that is soul crushing stuff. And I've watched in a lot of the magic resistance groups that I'm part of where people are just broken by this. They're just giving up. So I realized what we need right now, rather than focusing our energy, in so many different directions to stop so many terrible things that are happening, that what we need most right now is just to kind of believe that things are going to get better. Like believe, no, not just believe, but feel on a deep level that we're connected to other people like us and that there are more of us. And if we just keep doing what we need to do, like we will get to the other side. So in retrospect, and having gone through so many different rituals, talked to so many different groups, I think that's what we need most right now. Like we need something simple we can do daily or as often as we can do it that just says there is good in the world. There are people like me who believe in peace and love and justice and equality and who stand against all this darkness. And that's part of the ritual too. It's like it at one part of the ritual it says, I am a light in the darkness, and where I am there are others. It's something along those lines. So it's more an affirmation, but it's designed to just help us reset and focus and not fall prey to that nihilism and just giving up that is understandable. It's understandable. And lots of people are like, I can't watch the news. I can't pay attention. I understand that. I think you have to know what's happening. It's better to know what's happening, but I understand. Like not wanting to see this onslaught of horror all the time. So that's been my big turn, is away from, sort of more targeted, focused magic on certain people or things that are happening. I think that's still important to do, and I still encourage people to do it. But I felt like the best thing I could contribute was helping people find a simple, easy, short, but important and powerful ritual that they can do to keep themselves from falling prey to despair.
Yeah, fuck yeah, I love that. And yeah, definitely rhymes with a lot of my own thinking and stuff that I've been up to too. And so fuck yeah, I love it, and I love that there's other people out there kind of tapping into similar things. And as you said, like just knowing that yeah, different people are out here doing this, and however alone we might feel in our resistance work, there are a lot of others out there doing it. So yeah, fuck yeah. Is there
Well said.
anything that you're excited about right now? Is there any, I know you'd mentioned that the Magical Resistance book is back in print, so people might want to check that out. Is there anything else that you might want to mention that I haven't asked you about yet?
Yeah, the book is out again, and for the first time there's also a hardcover edition, which
Oh,
is
cool. Okay.
which is really cool, and it's been updated with some new rituals for our new era.
Very cool.
And it also it talks about it talks about my experience, that kind of what we've been talking about, what I've
Oh, wow,
learned,
okay.
how my approach has changed. It has the White Candle Conspiracy in it, which is also available online on Medium. So if people just want to like try that out, I highly recommend it, especially if you're feeling really disenchanted and despairing, and understandably so. So there is new stuff, which was great. It was really fun and interesting to read. There's even some new history that I've discovered. There's a big chunk of history in the book. There's like some rabbis who were doing magic against Hitler, some new like material. That's the other cool thing, is when I wrote the first book, there was so much I didn't know historically about people using magic in their defense against authoritarianism or cruel leaders or enslavement. There was just so much out there. I still think many books could be written on this subject, and I hope they are. So there's some of that new history in there too. There is a cool ritual going around right now that was shared with me that is an abolish ICE ritual, and it was just done for the first time as a mass ritual this past full moon, the full blood red moon. And interestingly, that was just a couple days ago, but today we see that Christy Nome has been thrown under the bus.
The latest sacrificial bus throwing has taken place.
Sacrificial
yes.
bus, yeah, exactly. The tires on that bus are getting pretty bloody at this point. And I recently saw just yesterday about a survey that was done that shows now a majority, so it's over 50% of people in the U.S. that were surveyed believe that ICE should just be abolished. So that was really good timing too. So there's still a lot of that sort of like really powerful, strong activist resistance going on. So I was really happy when I read that. It's like also nice and succinct and feels pretty powerful when I was reading it. So I'm just happy to see that the idea of magic resistance it just exists. It's a thing now, it's not going away. It's not new anymore. It's just something that activist magic people do. And that's great. That fills me with just joy because activism has always been associated with spirituality, whether it was like during the Vietnam War, it was like Christians and Jews were on the very front, and Buddhists and Hindu, it's just like, because I think spiritual people are compelled to help our fellow beings. It's just what we do. Like it's who we are. We can't help ourselves. So it's beautiful to see that as spiritual traditions change, that spirituality is still a part of activism, and it always will be. And it's so cool to me that when you go to a march or something, it's just such a diverse group of people. It's like gender doesn't make any difference, race, nothing. It brings people together, and part of that is that I think it's been fueled by spiritual traditions, especially paganism and witchcraft and magical traditions have really come to the forefront. So that's a beautiful thing to me. Like it's not strange to people anymore. They just understand that's how it works. Like if you're a witch, for the most part, if you say I'm a witch, someone's going to think, oh, you're cool. You're not going to mind that I'm transgender or non-binary. You're not going to be a racist. You're not going to be a bigot.
Unless you're J.K. Rowling, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But for the most part, that's the thing. I feel like there's been so much progress, and there's so much joy and in activism, and that's what I try to encourage too. It's never been a problem for me. Like ever since I was a little kid, if I saw someone getting picked on, I couldn't help but say something. It's just in my nature.
Yeah, I've always hated bullies too. Like I don't know, whatever. There's just something about it that it's like, fuck no,
Right?
And
yeah,
I think a lot of us feel that way. I think it's actually like a normal pro-social human reaction to have when you see that happening, right? Like,
yep, for sure. So when you extrapolate that to being an activist, speaking out in defense of democracy or defense of trans people or in defense of, Black Lives Matter, that to me, that brings joy, that feels joyful to me. It feels invigorating. So what I hope is that people can learn to not feel despair or why am I doing this? But just the fact that you're doing it, just the fact that you are speaking up, just the fact that you're out there holding a sign, that can be a joyful thing, even as the world goes to shit around you. There's a quote by A.J. Must, I think that's how it's pronounced, who was a clergyman during the Vietnam War. He was Dutch, he was born Dutch, but he was in the United States, and he was protesting the Vietnam War. And what he was doing was standing at night all by himself in front of the White House with a candle. And a reporter came up to him and said, "What are you doing? You're standing here by yourself with a candle. Do you think this is going to do anything?" And his reply, I think, is so important for people to understand. He said, "I'm not doing this to change the country. I'm doing this to keep the country from changing me." And that's the way we need to approach fighting against this fascist tide, is to find joy in the resistance to it. It's not always easy, but I feel like people can summon that joy, and that I am not acquiescing. I do not accept this. This is who I am, and I am going to say what I'm going to say. It's about not letting ourselves be changed. So that quote, that was part of the inspiration for the White Candle Conspiracy ritual. But I think about that a lot because I think that is equally as important as what we're trying to accomplish when we march, when we make calls, when we send emails, is to keep ourselves from being infected and being changed by this darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Fuck yeah. Well, Michael, this has been such a cool conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out this afternoon. Is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about? Do you have any questions you want to ask me or anything like that? Is there any territory we should cover?
I'm curious because I've seen what you're doing and your community building and community organizing and things like that. I would love to hear just your elevator pitch about what you're doing right now, where your focus is with your community, with your resistance to this terrible nightmare that we're living in.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so for people that haven't heard about the Green Mushroom Project, in a nutshell, it's basically a ongoing magical working, using the biological metaphor, like the relationship that some mushrooms share with some trees, basically the magical current that we've created and are fostering, or that we've maybe tapped into, depending on who you want, semantics, basically. But basically this kind of magical current, the work that we do that goes into it, it kind of serves in some similar way as what you described with the White Candle Conspiracy, a sort of mycelial connection between us practitioners, and just sort of knowing that even though we all might have our own funky, weird practices where we all do things our own different way, we can get together either online or just do it by ourselves on Friday night at midnight Eastern time and light a candle and say this simple phrase, or simple set of phrases resist, and I'll put it at the end of the podcast episode, as I do with every episode. But so we've got that as the sort of current that we're dipping into. We've been talking a little bit about just figuring out ways to divest ourselves from some of the digital surveillance that's being done, and just ways that we can support some of these corporations who are supporting things that we're not fans of. How can we sort of move away from having them be a part of our lives and a part of our magic and stuff? So these are ongoing conversations, and there's a lot of us who are into technomancy and using computers for magic and stuff. So it's complicated times to be working in. We've talked a little bit about, as I mentioned before, wanting to kind of offer some tools to newcomers to occultism and chaos magic about really being able to parse out the political landscape and kind of, I wish that I would have had some of this stuff decoded for me as a person who really considered myself like not that political in the past. I'm like, I don't care about politics. It's boring. I want to read about like planets and plants and shit. And like, I mean, that would be nice if that were, if it were possible to live in this beautiful world where it wasn't necessary to pay attention. But so I think just having some kind of tools to for people like myself to have that kind of decoded would be helpful as well. So yeah, and just really like you mentioned, like truly trying to find ways of like having fun, of like, finding the space to just to fantasize about what's next, about like what will, if all of this falls down, if the Tower card comes, like what will be the star that rises after? Like what is that dream that we want to see? Like, and maybe it's not for us, maybe it's for, people in the future or whatever, right? So, and I actually just talked about this with Aidan Wachter too, and yeah, really kind of trying to like do a little bit of like future optimism and getting to a place with like feeling safe where we can tell ourselves these better stories. My most recent thing, and the thing that's going to be coming up next as we record, is like a working to enchant salt. It's just a really simple guided meditation where we're going to be taking some Epsom salt and turning it into a protection salt, and you can use it to protect your home or other places in the manner that protection salt is usually used. And salt's great for lots of things besides. So people can figure that out for themselves. So yeah.
Wow, I love it. That's great. I love the mycelial metaphor too. As a big like fungi fan, I love that. You made me think of a lot there, and there's so much
big info dump. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like all the things I've been thinking of too. So if I can riff on that a little bit, it is weird. The tech. I'm a tech person. Like I had one of the first like Macintosh computers, and it led me to doing everything that I do now. Art, and I was a designer for a long time. I was never trained in any of that stuff. I taught myself through these devices. I was so intrigued by technology. It really opened a lot of worlds to me. But like yourself and so many people, technology just feels so much of it feels so toxic, especially with like AI, which I also, if anybody's interested in that, I wrote a screed. I call it a humanifesto called "Kill the Robots," and you can find that on Medium. Just search for my name and "Kill the Robots." But it really feels like we've reached a point, an inflection point with technology, because we're so assaulted by it. And there's the whole like shitification idea that these things were tools, and now they're all being turned against us to suck every last bit of our energy out of us and turn us against each other. So I'm struggling with that too. Like I teach tarot courses and I teach like magic courses and things like that. I was doing a lot of that online, but then I started doing it in person again. And I'm like, fuck, there's something so different about being in a room with other beings that's not screen mediated, and the exchange of energy or whatever you want to call it that is taking place there. And so I'm going to have to listen to whatever you've done podcast wise or written on that, because it is it's like such a diametric where technology has helped us so much, and you and I are communicating right now because of all this. But at the same time, so many of us feel like, holy shit, I've got to like unplug and touch grass and hug a tree and put my feet in a stream, but also like just be with people. I saw how my kids grew up and being teenagers during the pandemic, and suddenly their whole social life was through a screen. And so much of that has carried over. I feel like part of what we need to do when we get on the other side of this, and like exactly what you're talking about, is envision this future where these machines aren't assaulting us anymore, where what I talk about in the Kill the Robots is like the veneration of human intelligence, of biological intelligence, of the energy that we carry inside of ourselves that is not coming from a machine, no matter how closely it mimics how we converse and things like that. So thank you for bringing that up. I feel like that's a critical piece of the puzzle. How we find our humanness again, how we get our community back, how we get that biological mycelial network again, instead of the network through wires and internet tubes, and all that kind of stuff. So that's beautiful. I think that you're focusing on that and you're doing that. And I love Aidan Wachter, as I think I said on the last time. So I listened to a little bit of that, but I'm going to go back and listen to that whole show with him. So thank you for bringing that up, because that is really on my mind, and I'm delighted to hear what you and your networks are doing in that sense.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the AI thing, it's such an important topic right now. It's a huge thing for everybody in every industry, and I think for me at least, there's something I always kind of come back to with AI and a lot of other technology. It's not necessarily that there's anything inherently wrong with a tool, but like how it's being used, right? And I think within shittification, especially, we can kind of like, there's this like joke with like, the Scooby-Doo scenario where they pull the mask off of the villain, and it's like, it's capitalism almost every time. It's like, so, and I think that, these tools, I think in one of the brighter futures, I imagine, like, are actually used for the potentials of actually helping people that some of their creators envisioned, and they are not co-opted by these Elon Musk type people and turned against humanity, basically.
Yeah, and that's great, because I am an optimist, despite what, I think back to like Earth Day 1990. I was pretty young, but I was so invigorated. It was like Earth Day. Everyone's talking about the Earth, and we're going to celebrate the Earth. And things seem so positive. Things seem so possible. And then it all just went to shit in a way that was almost unimaginable. Obviously, a lot of this was gradual, but some of it is definitely really accelerated in the past decade or so. But I still am an optimist. I encourage people to think about like what Reconstruction 2.0 is going to be like when we kick these fascist fucks out of office, when we throw them in jail, when we take back government and our planet, whether our government is like a more anarchic based, community centered, whatever. But I really thought after the pandemic, during the pandemic in particular, I thought, well, we've seen how so much is broken. Capitalism, like you said, you rip the mask off every horrible thing that's happening, and there's capitalism, and just extraction and abuse of people and animals and all that sort of thing. What's going to come after we get through this particularly terrible cycle, I think can be really beautiful, because we can look back and think, how the fuck did that happen? How are we doing that to our fellow human beings? How were we continuing to dump poison in the atmosphere? And granted, I'm also a realist, so I feel like, man, we are pretty fucked in a lot of ways. It's going to take a lot of damage. But at the same time, I have to look forward to, I feel like you can only be so broken and so much evil, or again, wetigo, which I think is a great concept, that sickness, that consuming sickness, that once we expel that, we can do some really beautiful stuff. Like you said, with the technology, make it actually work for us. Just the fact that solar energy is getting so cheap now and so easy, but yet, we're still stuck in drill, baby, drill. There's so much possibility that I have to, and I think that's what you and the green mushroom community, green mushroom, right?
Yeah,
Collective.
Green Mushroom Project. Yeah.
Right.
Ongoing project. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the model. Like that is the model that we need to build now. So we have like an infrastructure in place when we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of what the sort of like mushroom as like a magical symbol and as a sort of magical ally speaks to too has to do with like, healing a lot of this trauma, like, healing these, parts of our mind that have been, afflicted by going through these difficult things. Like a global pandemic is a really difficult thing for a, social animal to have to go through. And even though we handled it as a species like much better than we've ever been able to like handle one of these things before, like a lot fewer of us died than historically would have been the case. Like it took other tolls, in other ways. Yeah. And so we're still absolutely coping with that. And it's probably going to be like a couple generations before we really are able to take stock of how all of that kind of was unpacked. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So it's like, keep up what you're doing.
Thank you. Well,
That's all I have to say.
You too. And everybody else listening who's, working similar veins. I've talked to so many cool witches and magicians and magical weirdos who are out there, doing their own forms of, magical resistance or really finding space to play and have fun and be that sort of like inspirational fool from the tarot for other people. So yeah, fuck yeah. All right. Well, Michael, do you have any like last words or thoughts that you'd like to leave the listeners and I with?
I think the most important thing we can all do right now is support each other, that we will get through this, that there is a bright place on the other side. It's going to be a shit ton of work to get there. I don't think we've reached like the bottom of the despair barrel yet, but this is a cycle, and I feel like when we get through this cycle, we will recognize things, we'll know things about ourselves, hopefully, that we won't be that history repeats itself kind of thing anymore. I do believe that evolutionarily our species will go in the right direction. I don't think, machines are going to wipe us out or any of this bullshit tech hype. It's going to take a lot of work, but I really still have a lot of optimism about where we're going to go. And I think this might be the cycle that we're in now might be when we realize, holy shit, we have to grow up. Mm-hmm. Like as a species, we really have to get our shit together. And we certainly will have plenty of bad examples to learn from. But we'll get there. That's what I think. And just help each other, stay positive, stay focused, stay active, fight like hell, and keep going. Just keep going.
Fuck yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'll put links in the show notes to all of your work, and I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today.
Thank you. It's wonderful. I thought that we might not be able to top our last conversation, but please send me an invitation anytime, because this kind of thing is energizing for me. So and it's part of that symbiotic network thing that that I think both of us really work hard to make happen. Yeah. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, thanks so much to Micheal M Hughes for joining me. Check out the show description for links to his work and find the new edition of Magic for the Resistance wherever occult books are sold. I'd also encourage you to check out the Kill the Robots AI thing that he mentioned. There's some pretty interesting ideas in there and some kind of like fun magical touchstones I think listeners will appreciate. I put a link to that in the show description. We already sort of did updates about the Green Mushroom Project in the interview, but I'll remind you that if you want to come hang out with us on the Discord, all you have to do is ask for a link to our server. And also, the workshop about data security and privacy hosted by Barracuda is available now on the Occult YouTube channel, where you can also find video episodes of the show. If you're the type of pervert who likes to use YouTube for listening to podcasts, we got you, and we won't judge you, friend. There's also some extra stuff like sound magic tracks and guided meditations and things like that you will find there. Let's go ahead and roll into listener mail and shoutouts. Barntal the Pocket Wizards, and much love and much love to everybody participating in the Green Mushroom Project, regardless of what that looks like for you in your practice. It's been such an honor and such a privilege to be sharing this wild journey with you all, and seeing the interesting ways that people's practices and artistic work continues to develop and flourish. It's a huge, huge honor. Fuck yeah. I recently recorded a really dope conversation with Charlie from the project about some really cool hypersigil work that they've been doing connected with a metal album that they're making, and it's very cool shit. Excited to share it. Shout out also to Keats Ross, Reverend Eric J. Millar, and everybody from the We the Hollowed crew. Stoked to be participating in this year's Haunt Quinox live stream, this time in person. Fuck yeah. And I'll go ahead and put a link to that in the show description. Speaking of magical resistance, as we have been doing in today's episode, shout out to everybody from We Are Aradia and everybody in the magical resistance. Fuck yeah. Shout out and thank you in advance to everybody in attendance for the Salt the Streets ceremony to create community protection salt that I'll be leading in Portland on Saturday at Workers Tap. And big thanks to Workers Tap for allowing us to meet there and generally being a chill fucking place to hang out. Shout out and thank you to Cathal, Sir Justin, Brittany, James, and everybody who's reached out with interesting tidbits. And greetings with deep gratitude to everybody who's been supporting the show in whatever manner that takes place. Thank you all for being here for another trip around the podcasting rink. If you like the show and you like what I've got going on here, you can support it on Patreon, which will entitle you to receive a bibliomancy reading from me. You can get that over the email. Making the show is, of course, a pretty wild amount of work, especially for just one intrepid podcaster, but it means a lot to me to be able to do it and bring you these interesting stories like the one that we talked about today. So thank you so much to the people who are making it all possible by giving on Patreon or buy me a coffee, and to the people who are supporting the show by spreading the word. You can tell all of your friends, enemies, frenemies, allies, and magical associates about it, as well as everybody you meet at the next PTA meeting, bake sale, anarchist collective coffee clutch, or ceremonial potluck you should attend. You can also post about it on social media or write a positive review where that's possible. All of these things are super helpful, so thank you so much to everybody who is doing that stuff. And yes, don't forget to smash the fucking shit out of that follow or alarm or whatever button it is on your various apps so that you can be alerted when a new episode arrives. All right, this was an interesting episode to make. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the whole YouTube channel with all of the content that we were talking about in today's episode was taken down from the internet. I'm guessing you might still be able to access it in one of those Internet Archive or Wayback Machine type places, but the YouTube channel is gone. From what I could see, it looked like they had a lot of subscribers and that it was probably making a fair amount of money for them. I have no idea what the actual reason why it was taken down is. My suspicion, and this is something that I don't have any evidence for, I want to be very clear, this is total conjecture on my part, but my suspicion is that they might have gotten a little nervous about identifying as pagan and pivoted to perhaps what we would qualify as a safer grift. Likely something more Jesus-based or something. That seems like it would be much safer for MAGA people. I think that these folks would likely be pretty tapped into the way that the winds are blowing in that whole MAGA circus tent, and I assume that it might not be super safe to like openly identify as like any type of spiritual person other than Christian there these days. The development of the YouTube channel being taken down is kind of troubling because it possibly illustrates this trend. Referencing back to the Wild Hunt article that I shared during the break, it's going to be important to watch for and push back against narratives that are being weaponized by the right against religious freedom. And it's going to be important for people to, join the side that actually represents their interests instead of trying to bootlick your way into a camp of people who don't recognize your rights or your humanity. Or thinking that maybe you'll get to wear the boots one day. You won't. And they're not ever going to let you sit at their table as an equal because they don't sit together as equals at any table. It's nothing but backbiting and desperation for whatever momentary recognition can be seized before the inevitable sacrificial throwing under the bus takes place. And it's the same thing that we've seen over and over and over in history in authoritarian regimes. It's a show that's been, honestly, pretty fucking played out. Something that humans have had to deal with over and over and over again in history. I mean, even the Bible is full of stuff about bad leaders and stuff. I'm going to share Psalm 58 because it kind of starts out with recognizing that leaders aren't always just. Do you rulers really say what is right? Do you judge people fairly? No. In your heart you plan evil. You think up violent crimes in the land. From birth, evil people turn away from God. They wander off and tell lies as soon as they are born. They are like poisonous snakes, like deaf cobras that stop up their ears so they cannot hear the music of the snake charmer, no matter how well he plays. God, break the teeth of their mouths. Tear out the fangs of those lions, Lord. Let them disappear like water that flows away. Let them be cut short like a broken arrow. Let them be like snails that melt as they move. Let them be like a child born dead who never saw the sun. His anger will blow them away alive, faster than burning thorns can heat a pot. Good people will be glad when they see his justice. They will wash their feet in the blood of the wicked, and people will say, there really are rewards for doing what is right. There really is a God who judges the world. Amen. Fiery stuff there. As I said, what we're seeing right now would almost be boring because of how fucking textbook it is. If it wasn't for how increasingly shitty is turning everything it touches until it seems like there's just an avalanche of shit and things can look rather grim. But amid these piles of dung being left for us to eventually clean up, there are already flowers sprouting up, acts of empathy and humanity, of neighbors protecting one another and sharing resources, of people getting together to use what's already available more wisely, to repair things that are broken instead of throwing them away, of people reclaiming their time and their minds from situations that aren't helpful for them. I'm not sure what the story is now with David and Leslie from the YouTube channel after the channel came down, but I hope that they're safe and well. I really do hope that they're able to act in the best interests of not just themselves, but also in the best interests of all the people who took their courses and consumed their content, because it would be a very unkind thing to make money from coaching people into beginning a witchcraft or magical practice or whatever, only could kind of turn around and stab the whole pagan community in the back by siding with people who want to do away with the practice of magic in the US. So I very much hope that that is not what is happening or has happened or whatever. And I hope that the people listening today have found our coverage of the whole Magic Wars 2017 farce, or whatever we want to call it. I hope people have found it entertaining and informative. I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell after sharing the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance, as I remind you to resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah. Thank you so much to Micheal M Hughes for joining me today. Check out the show description to find links for the stuff that we talked about. And also check out my last conversation with him called Magic for the Resistance and the History of the Tarot. Gratitude to Hecate, the Void, and all of Team Unseen. Gratitude for all of the support and kind words for the show and my other work that I've been receiving. I really appreciate it. And most of all, thanks so much to you for listening. Much love. Even in dark times, there are many bright lights, so shine on, friends. This is Lux Estrada, reminding you to stay strong, guard your mind, and stay fucking curious. Alright, I'm gonna send you out with one last man-on-the-street interview clip from the recording of the ritual in Hollywood in 2017. Cheers.
Now, they think they're preventing Trump from doing evil, but we just want to know, what do you think about magic? Did you realize that people were casting spells against you? And how do you feel about the fact that there are people casting spells on your behalf?
Well, I think magic is not real, but I do believe in spirits. Spirits is real, yes.
Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
And the objects are still in the sky, although the one inside looks like there's a little bit of element there. So we're turning around and heading back toward the base. The object is still